Israel is not going to be there forever in its present form. That's what Baroness Tonge, Jenny Tonge, a leading Liberal Democrat, has said, and she is no longer a Liberal Democrat. Her leader ordered her to apologise, and she refused. Was she right? Well, leading Jews from the chief rabbi down are outraged, and I'm joined by one of them, the Conservative MP, Robert Halfon, former policy director of Conservative Friends of Israel, and Baroness Tonge is with me in the studio. I say you're no longer a Liberal Democrat, you're no longer taking the
That's right.
whip in the House of Lords.
I haven't quite resigned my membership
haven't resigned
yet.
your membership, but nonetheless you've been disowned by your leader, justifiably?
I think very hastily, and I think ill-advisedly. He's going to have a lot of flack about it. I do know that.
Well, you've had a lot of flack.
I mean, of course, I always have an enormous amount of flack, and I'm quite used to that. I've also had an enormous amount of support.
But it was a very provocative thing to say.
Well, it's been said by many, many people to say that if Israel continues with the policies it's pursuing at the moment towards the Palestinians, let alone in the wider Middle East, if you combine that with the fact that Israel has lost its allies like Turkey and Egypt and is making enemies all over the Middle East, if you add to that the fact that it just cannot carry on pursuing the policies, doing the things it's doing, and expecting to survive. At the moment it survives because it has the backing of America. But that may not go on forever.
But its
the
argument...
American people may get fed up with backing this state that angers everyone and irritates everyone.
But Israel does say, we do these things because if we did not, we would not survive. We would be overrun by our enemies.
It might just be, and I wish to goodness Israel, which was a good concept at the beginning and many people supported it, I wish from the very beginning they had actually left the Palestinians where they were. Jews were in a minority when the State of Israel was founded. There were very few of them there. If they had gone in and said, OK, we're coming in, we're going to help you, we're going to build up this state, and we're going to include Palestinians from the very beginning. If they'd done that instead of persecuted them and now trying to take the whole area for themselves, it would have been a very different story.
All right, let's not go back into history too much. Robert Halfon, isn't she right, isn't Baroness Tonge right, when she says, in effect, I'm paraphrasing, that Israel is simply not helping itself?
Well, look, whatever one's views of the conflict, and of course there will be different views, the problem with Baroness Tonge is that she represents an extreme anti-Israel view. She attempts to delegitimise Israel. Her criticism is disproportionate, and it's also damaging not just to Israel, but also to her own credibility.
Except that she's speaking what she believes. A lot of people wish more politicians would say what they believe, and free speech is rather important, isn't it?
Well, I agree with free speech, and she's very welcome to go and say all these conspiracy theories on Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. But
why not in a public meeting?
She can say what she likes, but she represents the Liberal Democrats, and it was right for Nick Clegg to ask her to apologise, because clearly what she was saying was trying to delegitimise Israel, and her criticisms were disproportionate to everything that's going on in the Middle East. It's interesting how people like Baroness Tonge have these conspiracy theories, yet say very little on the massacres that go on in Syria every day, for example, and in other parts.
Well, possibly because that's not relevant.
Well, it is incredibly relevant, because her criticism, no one ever says, oh, is Syria going to exist, or Syria should perhaps not exist and should not get any support from the rest of the world, but they question their right to question what is going on. But in the case of Baroness Tonge, it's conspiracy theories and trying to delegitimise the state of Israel.
But that is a slightly curious argument, isn't it? America would hardly support Syria in the way it does Israel, because Israel's a friend and Syria's an enemy.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that the criticism of Israel and the kind of criticism that Baroness Tonge represents, and it takes very few politicians to unite Ed Miliband, Nick Clegg and the Foreign Secretary, because she is so extreme, her criticism is far more disproportionate and takes little account of what goes on in the rest of the Middle East.
Isn't that a fair point, Baroness Tonge? Apart from the fact that you shared the platform with an extremist, somebody who really does
I didn't know I was going to do that, and
because this was a thing at the Middlesex University.
It's what I said, not the crazy things that he said.
Did you challenge him?
People. I couldn't, because we were allowed 15 minutes each, and I wasn't going to challenge him in that time.
Did you applaud him?
I don't think I did. Probably at the end of his speech, everyone gives a little clap. He's quite a brave man in many ways, that one. I mean, he's done some brave things, but I don't want to talk about him.
But anyway,
I'd like to take up one thing that Robert has said, and that is that my conspiracy theories. Look, it's not a conspiracy theory. I've probably been to Gaza many more times than Robert has, and I've been to the West Bank a few times. I base my comments on what is happening to Palestinians in those areas, let alone what is happening to the Palestinians now in East Jerusalem, which is they're having a terrible time because it's been annexed and the Israelis want to get rid of as many Palestinians as possible from East Jerusalem. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, you see the brutalisation and the humiliation of Palestinians. That's not conspiracy, that is facts on the ground, let alone the settlements. They're gobbling up their land as we speak.
Isn't the point, Robert Halfon, that what she says, what Ms Tonge says, is inarguable in one sense? That is to say, Israel is not going to be there in its present form. That's the point, isn't it? In its present form. Do you believe that this situation can continue forever?
Well, first of all, Baroness Tonge says she's not a conspiracy theorist, but only a few years ago she said that the pro-Israel lobby had its grip on the world, and was rightly damned by her, the Liberal Democrat leader at the time.
Well, you wouldn't argue that there is a strong pro-Israel lobby, as there is a strong...
Well, you wouldn't argue that there's also a strong pro-Palestinian lobby, and that's a good thing. But to say that the pro-Israel lobby has got its grip on the world kind of shows the mindset. Now, Baroness Tonge talks about the West Bank and Gaza, and the West Bank has an economic growth rate of now 7-8%, and actually there is progress of relations, good relations with Israel. We shouldn't forget that Gaza is run by an Islamist terrorist organisation, Hamas, that overthrew the moderate Palestinians in 2006, and regularly fires missiles onto the state of Israel on an almost daily basis.
There, I'm afraid we'll have to end it. Thank you both very much, Jenny Tonge and Robert Halfon. Thanks both.
The Time 20